Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Love Well podcast. My name is Anna,
My name is Marlene.
and we are so excited that you guys are joining back in with us. We have another amazing guest that we are going to be able to talk to this episode. So, Marlene, would you like to kick it off and introduce our guest for us?
Absolutely. So I just want to also thank everybody that has just tuned in and listened to the Lovewell podcast and follow along with us with these amazing stories. Today we have my very special friend, Kiara. And just before I introduce Kiara, um, we have been talking about many different stories about immigration. And today we are going to hear a different side of immigration. We have talked about what the firsthand experience of immigrating as an adult has looked like for many of our guests. But now we're going to get to hear from Kiara, and she'll tell us her journey of immigrating here to the US as a child. And for the first time, we will get to hear a side of a story about DACA and learn what is even DACA? What does that mean? What does that entail? So, Kiara, thank you so much for being here with us. So excited. Dear friend, from the years that I've known you, it's been incredible to an honoring to be able to step into your story and who you are. And yeah, so we're so excited that you're here and you're willing to come and share with us about your journey that I know it's filled with many joys, but also many hardships. So we're just completely honored that you're here. Could you
Yeah.
tell us?
Thank you much. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I am so excited. It means a lot that you asked me to be on the podcast, and I am very passionate about advocacy for myself and for other immigrants, and sharing my journey with just being completely undocumented to having DACA, which I can also dive into. It's technically still not a um like a form of legalization, but it's something that's more temporary. But even having that and how that's changed my life, I'm really excited to be able to share that with other people.
Absolutely. Could you tell our listeners who you are, what you do, just a little bit more, so we can, get to know you?
In a little summary of myself. My name is Kiara. I am originally from Honduras, but I have grown up in the United States. Really, most of my life. I've grown up in South Carolina, and I am now a marketing manager. So I get to do a lot of fun marketing things both on the digital end and something that dives a little bit into like web development and SEO. So like on the digital side, I'm very invested in. Um, and aside of who I am in my career, my immigration story is something that you know, I want to share with the world too, because it's kind of shaped me into who I am, I think, and made me a more resilient and stronger person. I fully believe that the experiences that have been placed before me have developed me into the person that I am today.
That's awesome. Well, I am so glad you're on our podcast as well. It is such an honor to have you. Like Marlon said, we have kind of been able to capture a lot of different stories, which has been the best part with this episode, having another perspective. So you mentioned you're from Honduras, but can you tell us when you immigrated to the US?
Yes, of course. I emigrated to the US in 2001. I
Okay.
was 8 years old, and it was, being 8 years old, you're not really sure what's going on.
Mm.
And my family never had a plan to live here permanently. So, it's not something that was kind of like explained to me ahead of time because it wasn't something that was planned. So when I came here, essentially, I was just coming to meet my dad.
Hmm.
Yeah, so, if you want me to, I can go ahead and dive into that part of my
Yeah,
story.
Absolutely. Yes,
the floor
yes.
is
So I want
yours.
to give a little bit of background because
Mhm.
everyone's story is different, right?
Yeah.
So my life in Honduras was, I would say, a very privileged life. I am fully aware that, a large percentage of our population, as Marlon knows, is severely like, um, under the poverty line, and there's so much struggle. And it's usually what people hear of whenever they hear about Honduras. There are some good things that are heard from Honduras, but a lot of things are third world country, crime, this and that. But fortunately for me, I came from a family, where my mom had an education. She was able to get 2 bachelor's degrees and a master's, and she had a great career. And I was in private school. I learned English. I had all the toys I ever wanted. I was friends with people who probably came from the richest families in Honduras, and I was just living a very, very completely different life than most kids in Honduras.
Mm.
Now, the year before I came here, so when I was 7, my mom had what was supposed to be like a very simple surgery, and it turned into a life or death situation. But thankfully, she had a visa, and my dad was in the US already, and so she kept visiting him. And when she was dealing with the aftermath of this malpractice or this surgery that she had in Honduras, she was visiting doctors here in the US too. And they were doctors that were in the Charlotte area. And when I came here in 2001 with her, like I said, we weren't planning on staying here. Like they might have been planning for me to maybe like be here for a month or 2 or whatever, meet my dad, and then go back to our lives, and eventually my dad coming back too. But my mom fell into a coma maybe within a month, maybe less than a month, actually.
Wow.
I kid you not, it was like less than a month of me being here. So
Wow.
everything's brand new. My mom's in a coma. And this is like I came here August 31st, 2001. So sometime in September, my mom fell in a coma, and everything kind of changed after that, because now the doctors were trying to keep her alive. They barely could. And the US and the doctors here in Charlotte were professionals of like the highest kind, and they were telling her that if she went back to Honduras, she wouldn't likely survive, because they could
Mm.
barely keep her alive here with the technologies at the time. So they made the decision to just stay. Now, for me, my visa was a very short tourist visa. Tourist visas, I think they come in different kinds. Mine was just, I think, for 6 months.
Mm.
So it expired shortly after me being here, and I was left completely undocumented from that time in the 3rd grade.
Hmm.
Now, I'm gonna move forward now a few years. As a teenager, my family life is drastically different than when I was in Honduras. Now, my mom is left undocumented because her visa eventually expires too. She's unable to get a work permit. My dad has a temporary protected status. None of his education from when he was in Honduras, he was able to use here. So he is left working a very low wage job. My mom doesn't really have a way of like having a stable job, especially with her medical issues. And we are living like we're struggling, like horribly. And because of our lack of documentation, we were not able to have any type of government aid. So what
Mm.
we had to do to survive was everything that was in their hands, essentially, for my parents. Not for me, because I'm a child, so there was really not a whole lot I could do. But
Mhm.
I was very thankful for my parents, or I am now, because as a kid, I didn't really know a whole lot of the struggle that we were going through. Now, I understood that they were no longer taking me to buy clothes. Like when I was in Honduras, I would get everything I wanted. I had all the toys I ever wanted. That no longer was happening. I had the same pair of shoes all the time. I kid you not, from 8th grade through my freshman year of college, I had the same pair of tennis shoes. And
Wow.
yeah, so that was like completely different, and my mom had a lot of issues with her health, but at the moment she's doing fine. So, I'm very thankful for that. And when I was 15 was the moment when I finally understood that I was undocumented. At age 15, you do have some kind of understanding of, more of the real world. Not completely, of course, because you're still a kid, but I wanted to get my driver's license just like all of my friends. And I am friends with like a lot of American people. I was in a small town where there was a very, very small group of Latinos. So I just ended up being friends with mostly American people. And if I had Latino friends, they were people that were born here. So they didn't share the undocumented struggle with me. And, my parents had to sit me down and explain to me that because my visa had expired long ago, that I technically wasn't allowed to get a driver's license. And that shattered me
Mm.
because I, it was hard for me to understand. It's like, I just want to drive. Like, why can't I? Like, everybody gets to. Like, I just want to drive. So something that everybody was doing all of a sudden became something I couldn't do.
Yeah.
So that's when it all started for me, I think, like the realization. And then you move forward a few years and I am, I'm doing great in school. Like I'm at the top of my class. I excel. I'm thankful because I've always had that capacity for school and academia. And I made it into advanced placement classes, which were through a local college. And even though I got accepted into the classes, um I realized, or because of my teachers, that I could not qualify to receive the credits like all of my classmates were if they passed the class, because I was undocumented. So I didn't have a social security number. I technically couldn't get any college credit or
Mm.
anything like that.
Wow.
So I still took advanced placement classes, and it was crazy. At the end of the year, when you take your finals for those, I would sit down in front of the computer and take a fake test because my teachers didn't want me to feel left out or for my classmates to wonder what happened. So essentially, now that I think about it, it's like they were protecting me maybe. I don't really know the reasons, but I just know that I wasn't taking the real thing. They were just putting me in front of a computer, like pretend.
Mm.
And they didn't say, oh, you can't go to college. They just said, because you're undocumented, you can't take advanced placement classes, just like I can't have a driver's license. But then I get to the point in high school where I am graduating early and I am so excited. I want to apply to all these schools. And my counselors are telling me, we're sorry, but you cannot go to college at all because you're undocumented. Like, it doesn't matter that you're number 10 in your class. It doesn't matter that your GPA is 4.8. That does not matter. Um, and to me, I was like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Again, like, I'm just trying to go to
Yeah.
school, like what I've been doing this whole time. Um, and I was, still adamant about trying to go to college. So I applied to all these schools, but they all sent me letters back asking the same thing. We need you to submit your social security number. And I didn't have that. So I could never, ever move forward with anything. Um, and I ended up just doing so I decided to terminate my early graduation plans and did a senior year that I didn't have to do in high school. And I struggled a lot with depression at that time. Now, I don't think I understood that that's what it was. For me, it was just being extremely sad, and my life was like crumbling, right?
Mm.
Because even though I had worked so hard, I could not achieve what I wanted to, which was go to college. And coming from the family that I came from, college was just what you did. Like there was not a not go to college option. So I didn't
Mm,
quite understand what was happening to my life. And I floated around my senior year just struggling so hard. And reflecting back on this time, one of the things that I really want to do, hopefully soon, is speak with counselors in high schools and have some kind of education on how to deal with undocumented children that want to go to college, and help the counselors be educated on the fact that there are possibilities for them to go to college and how to talk to kids about it, because my counselors just were not aware, or at least I really hope they were not aware, because they were telling me I couldn't go. And my teachers too, like, there were some teachers, granted they were my new teachers, they hadn't taught me before, but I think that if you see a student that's coming from a 4.8 GPA and honors classes into your class and they're not doing well at all and they're not turning in assignments, that something is wrong, you know.
Right.
Not once did a teacher, an adult, ever step in and ask me what was going on, not once.
mm.
So now that I think about it, I'm like, man, like, if I saw that, I would hope that I would step in and ask a kid, like, hey, like, is there anything that you'd like to talk about? Or how can I help you? Or anything. And that never happened to me. But, I had a great support in my parents, and they I may have not shared my struggles. I kept that away from them. Like, I never shared with them that I was not paying attention in school, or that I was sad and that I was, just feeling so down because of my situation, because I knew that they themselves couldn't change it and they were going through enough for me to add that to their plate. But if you fast forward to right after graduating high school, I did my
Yeah,
senior
yeah.
year,
Can
I
you
still
tell us a little bit
graduated.
more of that?
Yeah,
Exactly.
sorry.
Like, no, no, I
Yeah,
love
now
it.
we're
I
getting to
love
the
it.
part. Now we're getting to the
No,
part.
this is beautiful. Thank you first for
Yeah.
being so vulnerable and sharing. Like,
Yeah.
we appreciate that and
No,
make
of
space
course.
for you and your story. And man, like that must have been really hard, just hearing
Yeah,
it.
it
Like,
was.
Yeah.
It
my
definitely
heart feels
was.
so much compassion, towards you. And you didn't know, you didn't have like a footprint to follow, or like
Hmm.
anyone that could really understand, what you were
Yeah.
going through, or even adults, I'm sure,
Yeah.
weren't not aware of how to even handle that.
Hmm.
But yes, please continue telling us.
No.
Hold on, can I ask
Yeah.
a question?
Yeah,
Kiara,
Anna, go
do you
ahead.
do you have any siblings, or was it just you
So
going
I
through
do
that?
have siblings,
Okay.
but they're younger and they were born here. So I was the only kid
Oh,
with this
okay.
situation, yeah, in
Okay.
my household.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So my sister's lives, they 100% have not experienced what I
Hmm.
did,
Yeah,
and
for sure.
I'm thankful for that, because I couldn't imagine, I wouldn't want anyone to go through that. And
Right.
sometimes I wish I could go back and just hug myself, like
Yeah.
little Kiara, because
Mhm.
she was going through it. And
She
I'm
was.
thankful, like, I thank God, because like he took care of me, because I don't know how else I would have done it. I really don't, because how do you handle that mentally? Like, everything's falling apart.
Well, and I just was thinking like how young you said 50, around 15, high school, and
Yeah.
Yeah.
just encountering like a whole nother level of like rejection when you're
Mhm.
already trying to fit in and you're already
Yeah.
trying to find out who you are as a person. Like you said, you just
Mhm.
wanted to drive, like just have a
Mhm.
driver's license, be like
Yeah.
normal, and then,
Yeah.
have this like thrown at your face after all of the hard work that you went through.
Yeah.
Man, I just wow. That's some resilience, girl. That is some resilience.
Yeah.
And I really don't even know where that came from, like, on my own. That it wasn't on my own. Like I said, it was God, because, like, seriously, I believe that I don't. There's no way. But going. Eventually, I realized that I could go to college. Like, 2 weeks after I graduated high school, I made one last attempt to apply to a private school, and it turns out that that's how I found out I could go if I went to private school. And I could also get private scholarships because those were not limited to they were not limited by my immigration status.
Mm.
So I was able to get some of those because I still had a good GPA. And then my parents sacrificed everything to make the rest of the tuition, like to pay for it. And here my mom was still struggling with her health and working and sending every single paycheck to my school to make up for my tuition. And they were, both of them, my parents were sacrificing other things. They would, pay the rent late. They would not pay their car insurances. They were getting rides from other people if they didn't have a tire that they couldn't fix, or whatever was happening, like just anything that you can imagine, like they were doing to make sure that I could make it through college. And my
Wow.
first year of college was also like crazy because I was undocumented, and in the back of my head I'm thinking, what's the point of going to college, getting a degree and graduating and not being able to work? I can't, there are
Right.
very limited places where I can work without documentation, and those places are usually severely underpaid, you
Yeah.
know?
Oh, yeah.
And so that was going through the back of my head. But then DACA came in the summer between my freshman and sophomore year of college. And again, because of my limitations with my status, I'm doing something that um, other people wouldn't have to do. And what that was I the school that I went to was a Baptist, a Christian school, and they had mission trips that students went on over the summer, but they would get paid through the North American Mission Board. And I'm still young, I still don't understand everything, and I go and ask if I can go, and they were like, you can't, like, technically you can't because we can't pay you because you're undocumented.
Mm.
Mm.
But this really nice man at the school who was like helping with this talked to a person in the North American Mission Board and explained my situation, and that person was like, she can come if she wants to, but just as a volunteer. So there I was working the whole summer away with a group of other teenagers, and I was not getting paid for it while they were.
Wow.
Goodness.
Yeah,
Wow.
but I found out that summer that DACA was coming out, and that was wild to me because, I'm trying to understand what this is, and I can't talk to anyone about it while I'm, miles and miles away from my family. So I'm just talking to my parents. And then the application comes out and I apply, and all of a sudden that January of 2012, no, 2013,
Mm.
January of 2013, I get DACA, and I now have a work permit. I now have a driver's license, and I am protected from deportation as long as I don't commit a crime. Like, that was wild. And so
Yeah.
that's what DACA is. DACA was a program that came out in the summer of 2012. That was an executive order by the then President Obama. And it was wild because it was one of those things that you would call left field. Like, nobody was expecting it. Like, you just don't come out and say, hey, you've been struggling your whole life. For the president, I'm going to make a decision that's now going to alter it for the better. Like, that's very, very rare.
Yeah.
Wow.
Especially
So
talking
Can
about
yeah.
you
deportation.
can
Yeah.
you walk us through like what that process entails a little bit?
Yeah.
Like to
So there
receive the DACA? Yeah.
So there were some like restrictions, I guess you could say. You had to have come to the US before you were the age of 16, I think, and
Okay.
before I can't remember the exact date, but it was like you had to have been here before the year 2008, I think it was.
Mm.
So if you had been gotten here before that date and you were under the age of 16 when you came to the US, that and you didn't have any kind of criminal record, you could apply for it.
Mm,
Okay.
Now that means that you have to trust that, the US government is gonna fall through or pull through on their promise, of what they're going to provide, because now you're giving your whole information to the US government, to the
Hmm.
Department of Homeland Security, and you're
yeah.
saying, "Hey, I'm here, like
Right.
undocumented, and I would like to apply for this."
Wow.
So, the process itself does not require an attorney, but most of the time people do get attorneys to file the paperwork, just because obviously they have that education that makes the application, like filing an application, just more flawless.
Yeah.
So my parents hired an attorney. Again, they barely had money, but they hired an
Mm,
attorney to help file for my paperwork. And it was sending documentation proof that I had been here at least before that date. That was a requisite. Also, sending information on just my background, and
mhm,
I went in for fingerprinting. There was no type of like interview of sorts. I guess the interview part was them checking your application. And there's a separate application, one for DACA and then the other one for your work permit. DACA is an abbreviation for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals,
mm,
which it's, in the name, you arrived as a child.
yeah.
Right.
So yeah, so that's what that is. That's how the process went. After you file that paperwork and you pay a $495 fee, you wait it out, and a few months later, I received that social security number and a work permit. Those things itself did not change my status as an undocumented person, because that doesn't give you a pathway to an immigration status like a green card or
Yeah.
citizenship. It doesn't do that. It simply just protects you from deportation,
Hmm.
and allows you to work during that time. So my social security number states for work authorization only. That's the only thing I can use it for. I still could not benefit from any state or government aid. But at the moment, if I had decided to go to a state school, I could have gone to a state school. Well, some state schools, not all state schools would allow
Yeah.
people from the DACA program, but then some became open to the idea of it, because you had a social. But
Oh.
anyway, so that's kind of how that
Yeah.
that
Quick
process
question.
was. Mhm.
How, when you have DACA, how long is it granted for?
Yes. DACA is a 2-year permit. So you have to renew really every year and a half or so to make sure that you get your permit on time. So for example, my permit was expiring at the end this year at the end of September. So back in May, I had to make sure that I had applied so that there's enough time for the DHS official to check the paperwork and get your work authorized, and you have it in the mail on time to present to my employer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. No, thank you for
Oof.
sharing.
I can only
So,
imagine.
so you are in what I've referred before to an in between, not being, you're undocumented, but you have a documentation to be able to work, but yet not a pathway to
hmm
citizenship. So, what is it like to be like in that in between?
It's so weird. It's so weird. Like I said, I basically grew up here my whole life. So
mm,
I was fully immersed into US culture,
yeah.
US everything. What I would say is, like, I didn't fully feel like an American because I always knew I was different.
Mm,
My family was. But the DACA program, it didn't really change my feeling of still feeling foreign, but it did change my feeling of normality in a way,
mm,
because I no longer had that thought in the back of my head that I was going to get deported. I
mhm,
no
Mm.
yeah.
longer had that thought in my head that I could no longer have a career
Mm.
or a future that I was looking forward to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could you share with our listeners too? Do you have any idea of how many people in the US? I know you're well versed in the DACA conversation, obviously, after DACA yourself. Um, how many people are there within
I
this
was wondering
program?
that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so according to statistics, there were around 800,000 people who would have qualified for it. But unfortunately, when the 2016 election happened, there was talks of ending the program, and a lot of people that were in the program decided not to renew because, again, that means you're giving your information to immigration, and they were scared of getting deported, so they decided to not renew and like move and like change jobs or do whatever
Hmm.
in a way of like going into hiding. So I think it was reported that over 100,000 people did that. So then there were only like 600,000 or so left in the DACA program. And to this day, those are the only people in it because they closed the program in 2016. Like I said, there were talks of ending it, and that process started. And when that process started, of course, all of us were very, very scared.
Yeah.
And the very few that left the program, put their lives at risk, thinking
Mm.
that it was what was best for them.
Hmm.
And they closed the program off to other people. So I know kids that, well, I say kids, but they're like 23 maybe right now that have been here since they were like a year old,
Wow.
and they could not have DACA. They could not apply. So I know actually a 21-year-old and a 23-year-old that grew up
Wow.
here since they were babies, and they have not been able to go to college or have been able to get like a good paying job or a driver's license because the program was closed off.
Wow.
I was gonna say, is that something? This might sound silly, so I apologize if this is
That's
ignorant.
okay.
But is that something where, like, you're kind of on the DACA program for your lifetime, or is it where you can eventually get a green card or citizenship from?
Yeah. Yeah, so actually the DACA program essentially, since it was an executive order and it's not like a law or anything, it's up for that instability. Like it could have been removed and it could be removed.
Mm.
So you can have it for life essentially if the program remains in place and if
Okay.
there's no limitation to it. Now, can you change your status? Yes, you can change your status. There are different cases. Now, I can't name all of them, but for
For sure.
example, if I were in a domestic relationship and let's say that there's like abuse or something, abuse essentially,
Yeah.
then you could apply for what's called a WAVA or a WAWA, something like that. I can't remember like how to say it, but it's a like a visa for victims of domestic violence, and that
Mm.
eventually can lead to a green card and to citizenship.
Hmm.
Or if you're the victim of like a hate crime, um that's a possibility. Another one is if you marry a US citizen. So what you don't know is that that is something that I got married to a US citizen. Now, I was very, very, very prideful for a while and
Mm.
refused to apply for a green card
Hmm.
because it angered me that because I fell in love with someone who was born here, all of a sudden now everything changes. And it wasn't fair if to my friends. It's like I'm leaving them behind. Like, you have DACA, you could lose DACA next month, next year. We're not sure what's happening with the program. You could get deported, but now I married the love of my life and can stay here because of that. Like it's wild. So that's like another way of doing it if you marry a US citizen. Or if I have DACA and I have a child and that child turns 21. When they turn 21, they can petition me to for a US residency. Now, all
Okay.
of the things that I mentioned, aside from the domestic violence option, the marrying a U.S. citizen and also having a child over 21, there are also other restrictions and things. For example, if I had come into the United States, like you would say, illegally, if I had done that, then I would have had to go through a process where it's called the consular process, where you have to go back to your home country and wait for your application to be approved, hopefully, right?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
Yeah, and
unfair.
then you
Yeah,
can, yeah, and then you can come into the country.
Mm.
But because I came here with a visa that stamped me as coming into the country legally, and that all of a sudden allowed me to avoid that
Wow.
process, and I can do it while I'm here. Um, so yeah, so there are other things, there are other ways I could go into it, but those are just some examples.
yeah.
But it was a
No,
good question.
no, that thank you for sharing that because within this
Mm-hmm.
podcast, obviously, there's our story and also like how it affects us as a whole as we talk about
Mm-hmm.
immigration, and this is such an
Mm-hmm.
important part of this conversation of like, hey, it's easy to assume. And I think that that's what our hope and our heart is with bringing this conversation and having different stories and different perspectives is like, there's
Mm-hmm.
not only one way. There's many layers that go into the conversation of
Yeah.
immigration, and we can't reduce it to, well, why don't you? And we actually, Ann and I, in one of our previous episodes, we addressed the get in line kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing,
Mm-hmm.
concepts that is thrown around so easily.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very, uh, it reduces the whole layers and nuance and specific situations that every person goes through as we talk
Mm-hmm.
about immigration. So thank
Yeah.
you for sharing this. This is so informative,
Yeah.
so educational. I know I've learned because I know you and I know other people that are within DACA, but I feel like I even learned more about like what does it really entail. And oof, it makes my heart just like have so many things. But
It
man,
builds character.
look, like
Yeah.
you said, it's made me a resilient person. I'm like, you're not kidding about
You
that.
are you are a strong
Look,
woman. I love
because
it.
also like the fear that you have to consistently live with,
Mm-hmm.
of like an uncertainty and unknown.
Mm-hmm.
So that leads
Mm-hmm.
me to my next question. And I don't know if you had any other questions that you wanted to ask related to
No, go ahead.
DACA.
Yeah.
Um, you mentioned God before,
Mm-hmm.
like you don't know what would have happened if God wasn't a part of your
Mm-hmm.
life. So
Mm-hmm.
clearly, it takes a lot of resilience. There's lots of uncertainty. There's a lot of
Lots of
fear.
prayer.
Lots of pray. Like, I mean, I can't. Can you tell us and share with us, like, what has God played? What
Mm-hmm.
role has He played, in your life as you
Mm-hmm.
go through all of this struggle?
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yeah. I would say like he has always been by my side, and the one thing that he keeps showing me is that he's a provider. Um no matter
Hmm.
what situation, whether it's, my life or my parents' life, like he has provided health, security, he has provided peace, he has provided um warmth and happiness and love. And so that is like the one thing that I've been able to fall back on. If I didn't have my faith
Hmm.
to rely on, I just don't know how I would have peace in my heart, because,
Yeah.
that faith allows you um to believe, that there is something better for you, even if things don't go the way that you're planning them to. I'm very thankful that the Lord has provided for me. And in my stories of up and downs, I again am aware that I have been very blessed in terms of the family that he's provided and the ability to get this education. But even if he hadn't done that, through seeing what he has done in other people's lives, I am reminded that, he's there for you, and
So good.
that he loves us. So, that's what I want to get to people, because and say to people, because again, like, it like, here's my story, and it kind of did turn into that Cinderella story, or I get it. Like, I'm still living life, but it's almost like there's a happy ending to this, right? At least that's where it seems like it's leading, where that may not be the case for other people. But no matter what, God is there for us, and he loves us, and he's a provider in all things.
That's so good. So, so good, Kira. So I can't help but think on top of that comment, we had a guest on here a few episodes back at this point, I think. But he's a refugee from the Congo,
Mhm,
Democratic Republic of the Congo. And what's so cool about his story, and us being able to like kind of you know, hear more and more on the episode, is that he's now working in the immigration office,
mhm,
helping refugees that are
mhm,
coming to the States.
mhm,
So I just think it's so cool. I know I'm not trying to downplay your experience by any means, but I think it's so cool how sometimes God uses our
mhm,
stories to really help others in the same situation. And I feel like
mhm.
you
I agree.
mentioned the students that and the possibility of going to college and all of the things that you had a hard time with your experience,
Mhm,
but that you want to
mhm,
pour into other people. So what
mhm,
would be something that you want people to learn, or maybe even have a heart for, to understand how to better communicate that to maybe people in their lives that
mhm,
That's right.
are also in those positions, where maybe they don't know that it's a possibility to go to college.
mhm.
And I know
Yeah,
that seems like
no.
it's on your heart too, to
Mhm.
share with others. So what would you
It
say to other
is.
people that want to know more about that?
Uh, yeah, I say just have conversations. Have conversations with, if someone has shared that they are undocumented with you, that means they've opened that door
Mm,
into that part of their lives. And I think that if you care about that person, learning more about them is important. And then after you learn more, then you carry those conversations over to other people. And I fully believe in like advocacy, how that is so
yeah.
helpful, and having one-on-one personal conversations. It's that personalization and getting to know people that can really help make a difference, because
Mm,
if you're yelling at people or trying to prove people wrong all day, making arguments, that's not a loving way of doing things.
yeah.
And so, if there are people out there who have a chance to speak with students, if anybody listening is like a counselor or a teacher, that that they can know that there are possibilities for undocumented kids to go to school, and the likelihood is that a private school will allow them in. I know that actually there are no state schools that would allow an undocumented person in this region of the US, but there are some in like California. Um, and there may be a few other states who allow it. And there are private scholarships that students can apply to. And again, there are other states that maybe their legislations have approved for certain funding to go to undocumented students. And it's important for these kids that want to have a higher education but don't have documentation to know that there is a possibility for them to pursue that.
Right. That's so good. Wow. So, so good. I also was going to say, sorry, do you want to say anything, Marlon?
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I also was going to say, I just love how your story is, just like you said, God is the provider in so many ways, but just the premise of still being able to be, like you're saying, having those conversations with people, like helping people feel seen and noticed, even,
Mm-hmm.
like Marlon mentioned before. I think a lot of times we assume, just based off of outward appearance, outward factors, you know um and I think it's easy to bypass, the opportunity for
Mm-hmm.
people to really feel heard. And like you said, if they open up the door of explaining their, if they are undocumented, undocumented, like explaining that to somebody. I just feel like it's one of those things that we want also our listeners to feel heard and seen as well, if anyone has been able to listen to this and they can relate, because I think that's one of the coolest parts of Marlon and I being able to continue doing this,
Yeah.
is just hearing like people reaching out and being like, this really made me feel seen, like this really made me feel like, heard in a different way. And so I just want to say thank you again for sharing your story, because I do feel like just by you sharing your story, there's others that maybe can also relate, that are listening in as well. So I'm very encouraged. I'm just
Yeah.
grateful that you were able to share all of that, all you have with us. It's been amazing, honestly.
Thank you
Yeah.
for letting me share it.
And thank you for
Yeah.
doing it so vulnerably and open. I think that I know it's not easy to also share the harder parts
Mhm,
of our stories, and especially, when it comes to being
mhm,
undocumented. That's not something that someone,
mhm,
just feels as comfortable, because, there is the
mhm,
potential of people. And I know that this is like outside of, we've shared
Yeah.
stories too of the hurtful encounters that you've had because of
mhm.
your status, which we didn't even
Yeah.
get into all of that. But just very thankful. And also, can I just mention real quick, your parents, like,
Mm,
man, their sacrifice, it wow,
Mhm.
it just, I just kept thinking,
Yeah.
wow, the love, that's the love of a
yeah.
parent. I'm not a parent, but to anyone that is, like, I'm sure that they can put themselves
I
in
was
like,
thinking
I
the
would do
same thing,
anything
because
for
you
my
mentioned like
child.
you kind of were like,
Mhm. Yeah.
well, you
Yeah.
mentioned you were kind of like sad and they didn't know what was going on,
Mm,
but they still supported in such a
Mhm,
sacrificial way.
yeah,
Like,
mhm.
I just, wow. Yeah, that's
Yeah, they
amazing.
did, and
absolutely
it's
beautiful.
honestly like I always will be thankful for them, because I know that not every parent has been there for their child as mine
Mm,
were. And again, I'm just saying, like, God provided, he provided me with like the parents that he did, and he provided
yeah,
my parents with the strength and will, when, and
Mm,
where there's a will, there's a way.
yeah,
So
yeah,
that was proof right there of
yeah.
that.
I
No,
love that.
and your
Wow.
Yeah.
story is just another beautiful reminder of when God is present, like, there is hope still. When God is
Mm.
present, there's still a
There's
way
still
out.
hope. You're
There
right.
is still hope. There is still,
Mm,
Yep.
well, it's not yet, but
Mm-hmm.
He is present. So yeah, thank you for
Mm-hmm.
sharing all of that. So we always ask our guests a last question. Um, what would be something that you can tell our listeners? How can we love well immigrants?
Yeah. I would say again is getting to know more
mhm,
about our stories, getting to know us as your friends, your neighbors. Honestly, there are over 11 million undocumented people in the United States.
Mm,
Our population is large and dispersed throughout the US, so there is a likelihood that you have met an undocumented person, maybe even befriended one or had one in your life, either in school, at work, someone where you frequent, like a restaurant, or like everywhere. I mean, just as an example, I like I said, I grew up in an area where there weren't a lot of immigrants, and most of the people were Americans that, they're multi, like they're like fourth, fifth, generation American. So they don't have any connection to like a different world.
mhm,
And those people, they just knew me as a person, and they treated me just as a person, as an individual that they knew. And if they find out that I'm an undocumented person, then I would want them to still see me as that same person, because it doesn't make us, an alien. Even though we may get called that by some people, that
yeah.
is, we're just like you. We
mm,
are um mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, best friends. um people that just want to live in a community where they are safe,
Mm.
in the community that they love. If we didn't love it here, we probably wouldn't put up with the stuff that we go through
Come on
to be
now.
here.
That's
Yeah.
mic drop right there. Wow.
Wow. Incredible. Thank you so much, Kiara. Thank you. Is there anything
Thank
else,
you.
Anna, that you want to ask our guest?
I think that was, I mean, honestly, I'm still taking it all in, but that was so good. And again, I know we've said it a few times, but thank you again for sharing. I think we're going to probably do a recap because it's been so fascinating to see how everyone has a different process or a different experience somewhat.
Mhm. Mhm.
But the answer with that question is usually pretty much resounding the same.
Yes,
Like,
Mhm.
just ask
it is.
questions. Like,
Mhm.
curiosity goes so far.
Mhm.
And
I
even
agree.
with the curiosity, like with not having judgmental instinct, like you said, treating a person as a person. That's
Mhm.
why we called this Love Well, because we
Yeah.
think that's the way to love people well, is to treat them as
Mhm.
people. So
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
An
I think
overflowing well of love.
oh, yes.
yes, yes.
That's all I was saying.
Yes, 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 yes. And I think you mentioned also advocacy. I love like
Mhm.
it starts with curiosity, and I love that you also brought that word advocacy, because there are things that we can do to advocate also, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in
Mhm.
ways that we can tangibly support. So
Mhm.
yeah, like if you're able, if you were interested in this, you did not hear about DACA or were not familiar with what DACA is.
Mhm.
But now you are through Kiara's story and you want to further support. um I would say encourage you. I know that there's many ways that you can do that. Online there's possibilities and different options for you to support in that way if you want to do it tangibly as well. So yes, Kiara, thank you again for joining us, and thank you everybody for listening
Yes.
in. We hope you all have a great rest of your day, night, or whatever time you're listening in from. Goodbye.
Take care.